I was out the back, trimming the lily-pillies along the fence line when my phone buzzed in my shirt pocket. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October. One of those warm spring days on the Mornington Peninsula where the sky goes that particular shade of blue that makes you feel like the world is still mostly all right. I had my gloves on and a pile of clippings at my feet, and I was thinking about Nafuja Stride of Verole. I had enough time to finish the hedge before the evening news. I pulled off one glove and fished out the phone, expecting maybe a reminder from my GP about a checkup, or a message from my mate Trevor about the weekend golf. Instead, it was a text from my daughter-in-law, Cheryl. Just 2 lines. Hi, Frank. Hope you're well. Could you have a look at your email when you get a moment? Sent you something about the holidays. Thanks. Nobody sends a careful email about the holidays unless what's in it is something they couldn't bring themselves to say out loud. I pulled off the other glove, tucked them both into my back pocket, and walked inside through the sliding door. I washed my hands at the laundry sink, poured a glass of water, and sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. The subject line read, "Christmas plans, just wanted to keep you in the loop." I opened it and read slowly. Hi, Frank. Hope you're keeping well down there. Nathan and I have been talking with my mum, Lorraine, and since she's flying up from Hobart for the full 2 weeks, we've decided to keep Christmas Day itself just for the immediate household this year. We want it to feel relaxed and low-key with the kids' routines and everything. We are so incredibly grateful for everything you've done for us, especially with Beau's assessments and everything that followed. We were thinking maybe you could come over on the 27th or 28th for lunch. We'd absolutely love that. Warmly, Cheryl. I read it again, then a third time. Immediate household. As if I wasn't family. As if 2.5 years of covering every cost attached to my grandson Beau's autism assessments, his speech therapy, his occupational therapy, and his specialist appointments, somewhere close to $42,000 in total, had somehow not bought me a seat at the Christmas table. As if every Sunday I drove the 45 minutes from Rosebud up to their place in Mount Eliza to take Beau and his little sister Chloe to the park, the beach, the market, or just to sit in the backyard and build things out of whatever timber I had in the boot of the car, as if none of that counted either. As if I was useful when there was a problem, and optional when there was a celebration. I closed the laptop and looked out through the kitchen window at the back garden. The bottle brush my late wife Sandra had planted the year Nathan started primary school was in full flower, all red and bright against the fence. She'd been gone 4 years now. Ovarian cancer. She fought it hard and long and with a grace I still can't fully describe. In the years since, I'd learned how to build a life in a house made for 2. The garden helped. The Sunday drives helped. Beau and Chloe helped more than anything. Sandra would have known exactly what to do with an email like that. She would have called Nathan within the hour, not to shout at him but to tell him simply and clearly what was right. And he would have listened. He always listened to her in a way that he never quite learned to listen to me. That was just the shape of things. I'd made my peace with it. But it meant that in her absence, these things had a way of sliding. And for the past 3 years, the thing that had been sliding furthest was Lorraine. Let me explain who Lorraine is, because she matters to this story. Lorraine Buckley was a retired administrator from Hobart who had done very well for herself after her divorce 15 years ago, and had spent most of the time since making sure everyone around her understood that. She wore expensive jewelry to backyard barbecues. She corrected people's grammar in casual conversation. She had opinions about parenting that she delivered as established fact, and opinions about me that she delivered not at all but made felt in small, persistent ways. A comment redirected. A suggestion bypassed. A story about Nathan from his childhood that she would tell as though she had been the one present for it. She wasn't cruel. I want to be fair about that. She was the kind of person who takes up all the air in a room and doesn't notice because she's never had to notice. She flew up from Hobart twice a year, commandeered Cheryl's kitchen, reorganized the toy cupboard, rearranged how bath time worked, and flew back to Tasmania, leaving behind a family that had somehow quietly reshuffled itself around her preferences. At Nathan and Cheryl's wedding, nearly 8 years ago now, Lorraine had cornered me near the dessert table and said with a bright, practiced smile, "Frank, I just want you to know that Cheryl's very well taken care of. You mustn't worry about a thing." I'd smiled and thanked her, but I'd thought about the way she said it for years afterwards. It wasn't reassurance. It was a reallocation. She wasn't telling me I could relax. She was telling me I could step away. When Beau was born, I showed up. When Chloe arrived 2 years later, I showed up again. I was the one who came over on short notice when both kids had a stomach bug and Nathan and Cheryl were at their wits' end. I was the one who drove Beau to his Saturday morning therapy sessions when Nathan had work and Cheryl had Chloe's swimming lessons at the same time. I never canceled. I never arrived without something for the kids. A book, a bag of mandarin, a small bit of timber we could whittle together at the workbench. I didn't do it to earn anything. I did it because those children were the best thing that had happened to my life since I lost Sandra, and being present with them felt like the most important work I had left to do. When Beau was 3.5, his preschool raised some concerns. He was bright, observant, extraordinarily focused on certain things, but he was struggling with group situations, with transitions, with the kind of noise that other kids didn't seem to register. After a long process involving a pediatrician, a psychologist, and eventually a developmental assessment at a private clinic in Frankston, he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. The public waiting list for ongoing therapy support ran to over a year. The private options were available immediately, but the costs were significant. Nathan and Cheryl were stretched already. They were carrying a mortgage in Mount Eliza on 2 incomes that didn't leave much room. Cheryl had moved to 3 days a week to manage Beau's appointments and school hours, and Nathan's work as a project supervisor for a civil engineering firm, while solid, wasn't the kind of income that absorbs $450 a week in specialist appointments without something else giving way. They didn't ask me. I want to make that clear. It was Nathan who mentioned, quietly and almost in passing one Sunday afternoon, that they were looking at spacing out Beau's sessions because of what it was costing. He wasn't asking for help. He was just telling me, the way a son tells his father something he's carrying, so it's not quite so heavy. I called the clinic the following week and arranged for the invoices to come directly to me. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, sensory integration sessions, the full program, 3 to 4 appointments a week. Beau was 4 when we started. He turned 7 in August, just gone. In those 3 years, his world had opened up in ways that still stopped my breath when I thought about them. He'd gone from a boy who could barely tolerate a birthday party to a boy who stood in front of his whole Year 1 class and gave a 2-minute talk about how ants build their tunnels. His teacher had sent Cheryl a note afterwards. Cheryl had forwarded it to me, and I'd printed it out and put it in the top drawer of my bedside table, where I kept the things that mattered. That was what my money had gone toward. Not a holiday or a renovation or a new car. A little boy learning how to be in the world. And now I wasn't invited to Christmas. I sat at that kitchen table for a long while after reading the email. The afternoon light shifted through the curtains, and the bottle brush moved a little in the breeze, and the house was very quiet. I knew better than to do anything straight away. I'd spent 34 years teaching secondary school history in Frankston, and one of the things that job teaches you absolutely is that the first thing you want to say in a tense moment is almost never the right thing to say. You learn to wait. You learn to let the feeling settle before you let it speak. So I went back outside and finished the hedge, and while my hands were busy, my mind was working. That evening, I opened my filing system on the laptop and started pulling things together. Every bank transfer to the clinic, going back to the beginning. Every receipt for birthday presents, Christmas gifts, school supplies. The new backpack I'd bought Chloe just last month because hers had a broken zip, and Nathan had mentioned it in passing. The emails from Cheryl thanking me after Beau's progress reviews. The text from Nathan 7 months ago that said simply, "Dad, I don't know what we'd do without you. Genuinely." Photos from the Sunday outings. Beau at the aquarium pressing his face against the glass at the jellyfish tank. Chloe asleep against my shoulder on the drive home from the night markets in Mornington. Both of them at my workbench in matching safety glasses, dead serious, helping me sand down a small wooden boat I was making for Beau's birthday. I put everything in a single folder and labeled it clearly. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with it, but I wanted the full picture in one place before I made any decision at all. The next morning I did something I very rarely did. I had a look at Cheryl's Instagram page. She'd posted 4 days earlier, a photo of a booking confirmation for a resort in the Yarra Valley. 5 nights over the Christmas and New Year period. Based on the resort's website, the package with the private cottage and the winery dinners came to somewhere around $6,000. The caption read, "So ready for this. Christmas is going to be beautiful this year. Grateful for everything." I sat with that for a while. Beau's December therapy block was invoiced to me at the start of each month. The January invoice was already scheduled. It would come to $3,400. I'm not a man who reacts in anger. I spent most of my working life in classrooms where teenagers were trying to provoke a reaction, and I learned early that the reaction they're hoping for is almost never worth giving them. The same principle applies more widely than people realize. So I didn't call Nathan. I didn't reply straight away. I made myself wait another full day. Then I wrote back to Cheryl. "Hi Cheryl. Thanks so much for letting me know about Christmas. I completely understand that you want the day to feel manageable with Lorraine there and the kids' routines. I do want to check in with you about one thing. I happened to see your post about the Yarra Valley trip. It looks absolutely beautiful, and I'm sure you'll all love it. I just want to make sure we're on the same page about the January therapy invoice, which will come through to me as usual at the start of the month. I think it's worth having a quick conversation before things get too close to the holidays. Would you have time for a call this week? Thanks, Frank." I read it back 4 times. It said what needed to be said. It didn't accuse anyone of anything. It connected the dots without drawing the line for them. I pressed send. 2 hours later, Nathan called. I could hear it in his voice before he'd finished saying my name, that particular tightness that meant he was caught between 2 things and hadn't yet decided which way to fall. "Dad, Cheryl got your email." She said it felt like a bit of a dig. I kept my voice even. I asked a question. "Nathan, that's not a dig. That's a conversation." "She's upset." "I imagine she is. I'm a bit concerned myself." A pause. "Dad, the Yarra Valley trip is Mom's shout. It's got nothing to do with the therapy budget." "I understand that," I said. "But you can see how it might look from where I'm standing. Your mother-in-law covers a $6,000 holiday, and the same week Cheryl sends me an email telling me I'm not at Christmas while I'm the one who's been covering Beau's therapy every single month for 2.5 years. Silence. That's not how we meant it," Nathan said finally. But the certainty had gone out of his voice. "How did you mean it then?" Another pause. "Longer this time. Lorraine doesn't get to see the kids that much. She's down in Hobart. She wanted Christmas to herself. She's in Hobart. I'm 45 minutes up the road. I see the kids nearly every week. I'm the one who takes Beau to his Saturday sessions when you and Cheryl are both tied up, and I'm being asked to come by on the 27th. Dad, Nathan, I waited a beat. I love you. I love Cheryl. I love those kids more than I have language for. But I need you to hear me say something clearly. I can't keep putting in at this level. Financially, and in terms of my time, while being treated like a courtesy visit. That's not a relationship. That's an arrangement." I heard him breathing. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to think about what I've just said. Actually think about it. And then I'd like the 3 of us to sit down and talk face to face. Not by email. Not on the phone. And Mum? Lorraine? If Lorraine is involved in how decisions get made in your household, then yes. Her too. The silence that followed was long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then, I'll talk to Cheryl. Thank you, son. The next several days were quiet, in a way that required some effort on my part. No word from Nathan. No word from Cheryl. Nothing at all. I worked in the garden, took the long walk along the coastal track at Point Nepean, had Trevor over for a game of cards one evening. I thought about my own father, a man who didn't say much but who had a very clear and unhurried sense of what he would and wouldn't accept. He used to say to me, "Frank, people will treat you however you show them you're willing to be treated. Every time you wave something through without a word, you're signing off on it." I'd spent too many years waving things through. Not this time. On the 11th of November, I received an email from Cheryl. Friendly, newsy, not a word about our previous exchange. "Hi, Frank. Just a heads up that Beau's December sessions have been confirmed with the clinic, starting the 2nd. He had such a great session last week. His OT said his fine motor coordination has really improved. He was threading laces by himself, which sounds small, but it's actually a big deal for him. Hope you're having a good spring down there, Cheryl." I read it and felt something go clear inside me. Not anger, something more like resolution. She was going to let it pass. She was going to keep things pleasant on the surface and trust that the invoice would come through on schedule while I spent Christmas Day alone in a house on the peninsula. I wrote back the same evening. "Hi, Cheryl. That's such wonderful news about Beau. The lacing is genuinely a milestone, and I know how hard he's worked on it. I'm so proud of him. I do want to come back to our earlier conversation, though. I haven't heard about meeting in person, and I think it's important we do that before the end of the month. I'd like to have an honest conversation about what our arrangements look like going forward, including around the therapy support. Please let me know when works for you. Frank." This time it was less than 40 minutes before Nathan rang. "Dad, what do you mean, going forward? Are you saying you're going to stop paying for Beau's therapy?" "I'm saying I'd like to have a conversation before I make any decisions. That's all. He needs those sessions, Dad. You know what the waiting list is like for the public system. You know what he was like before." "Nathan." My voice was steady. "I know exactly what he was like before, and I know exactly what he's like now, because I have been there every step of the way. That's actually part of what I want to talk about." A pause. Then, quietly, "Okay. When?" "This Sunday. Here. At my place. 2 o'clock. You. And Cheryl." He hesitated. "What about Mum? Is Lorraine still up from Hobart?" "She's here until the 23rd. "Then yes, bring her." Another pause. "All right. Thank you, Nathan." They pulled into my driveway at 2:15 on the Sunday. Nathan looked like he hadn't slept especially well. Cheryl had the careful composure of someone who'd been preparing herself for something. Lorraine came in behind them in a linen blouse and good earrings, glancing around my kitchen with the mildly appraising expression of someone who finds most things slightly below their expectations. I'd set the kitchen table simply. 4 chairs, 4 cups of tea already poured. My folder of documents and 2 printed summary pages set in the center. I'd also put a small plate of biscuits out, because some habits run too deep to break. "Thanks for coming," I said. "Please sit down." Lorraine surveyed the room a moment longer before sitting, the way people do when they're deciding how seriously to take a situation. I waited until everyone had settled. Then I said, "I want to start by saying that I love my son, and I love Cheryl. And Beau and Chloe are the greatest joy in my life since I lost Sandra. I'm not here to make things ugly. I'm here because I think there are some things that need to be said plainly, and I've always thought that problems only grow in the dark." I slid the summary page across to Nathan and Cheryl. "Over the past 2.5 years, I've contributed just under $42,000 toward Beau's autism assessments, his speech therapy, his OT, and his sensory integration sessions. I've also covered school supplies, clothing, birthday and Christmas gifts, and weekend outings. I've driven Beau to approximately 70 Saturday sessions. I haven't kept count of the petrol or the hours. I did all of it because I love him, and because the work is changing his life. I didn't do it to hold anything over anyone. I looked at each of them in turn, but I received an email telling me I wasn't welcome at Christmas. And within the same week, I saw a post about a $6,000 holiday in the Yarra Valley, and I'm sitting here trying to understand how those two things fit together in a family where I've been the one making the therapy possible. Lorraine opened her mouth. Lorraine. I kept my voice entirely level. I'll come to you. I'd appreciate a moment to finish. She closed her mouth. She looked surprised. I think she may have been surprised. I'm not upset about the Yarra Valley trip. If you want to give your daughter's family a gift, that's entirely your business. What I'm troubled by is the pattern. When there's a financial problem, I'm family. When there's a celebration, I'm optional. I've let that pattern continue for too long because I didn't want to create difficulty. That ends now. Cheryl's eyes were filling. Nathan was looking at the table in a particular way that reminded me of him at 14, when he'd broken the back window, kicking a footy, and had to come and tell me. I turned to Lorraine. You're a significant presence in this family's life. You love your daughter and your grandchildren, and that's real. And I've never questioned it. But over the past few years, you've gradually positioned yourself as the central figure in a way that's pushed me to the outside edge. Christmas is immediate family. The decision about who matters on a given occasion gets made around your schedule. And the thing is, you perhaps haven't noticed doing it because you've never had to notice. Lorraine straightened slightly. Frank, I don't think that's quite. I'm not accusing you of bad intentions, I said. I'm describing what I've observed. There's a real difference between the two, and I'd ask you to let me finish. She was quiet. You fly up from Hobart twice a year. I live 3/4 of an hour away, and I'm here almost every week. I was at Beau's last 3 therapy milestone reviews. I was in the car park at Frankston Hospital when he had his ear procedure at age 5 because Nathan was on site and Cheryl needed someone there. I was here. And I've been okay with doing all of that without fanfare. What I'm not okay with is being handed the bill and being told the table is full. The room was very quiet for a moment. Anyater was going at the bottle brush outside. Then Nathan raised his head. He looked at Cheryl. He looked at Lorraine. Then he looked at me with an expression I recognized from his whole life, the expression he made when he'd worked something out and the working out had cost him something. You're right, Dad. His voice was rough at the edges. We've been taking you for granted. Not deliberately, I don't think. But we have. Cheryl made a small sound. No. Nathan said gently. He's right, Cher. He glanced at his mother-in-law. And I've let the lines get blurry because having that conversation felt harder than not having it. That's on me. Cheryl looked at the table for a long moment. Then she looked at me, and her voice was quiet and direct. Frank, I owe you a proper apology. Not one of those apologies that's really just asking you to move on. I didn't think carefully enough about what that email would feel like to receive. And then when you raised it, I sent that update about Beau's sessions as though you hadn't said anything. I knew it was wrong when I was doing it. She shook her head. I think I just hoped it would resolve itself. That was cowardly. I looked at Lorraine. She was looking at her daughter with an expression I hadn't seen from her before, not quite chastened. Something more complex than that. The expression of a person who has just watched someone they love be braver than they themselves have managed. After a moment, Lorraine said, Frank, I'm not easy to share space with. My ex-husband told me so for 15 years, and he was right about that. if not about much else. A small pause. I didn't set out to push you aside. I'm not sure I was even aware of doing it. But I can see how it would have felt from your side. It wasn't a full accounting, but it was honest. And from Lorraine, I understood it for what it was. I let out a slow breath and said, "Here's what I'd like." They all looked at me. "I'll continue covering Beau's therapy through to the end of March. After that, I'd like you to take over that responsibility yourselves. Not because I want to withdraw my support for Beau, but because it's important that you build the capacity to sustain his care independently. That gives you 4 months to plan and adjust." Nathan nodded. "More than fair, Dad. Second, I expect to be included in Christmas, Easter, the kids' birthdays, and significant family occasions. When Lorraine is up from Hobart, I'm glad to have her here, but I'm at the table too. If that takes some coordinating, we coordinate." "Of course," Cheryl said. "Of course you are." Third, Sundays with Beau and Chloe stay. That's not a favor, and it's not optional. That's just what we do. It's part of who we are to each other. "Beau talks about Sundays with you all week," Nathan said. "He calls them Grandpa Days. He has for over a year. I hadn't known that." Something caught in my chest. Lorraine leaned forward slightly. "And where do I fit in all of this, Frank?" "I'd like to know how you see it." I looked at her steadily. "You fit in exactly where I do. As a grandparent who turns up, does their part, and doesn't make it a competition. There's room for 2 grandparents in those kids' lives, Lorraine. There always was. The problem was never the space available. It was just that nobody had said so clearly." She held my gaze for a moment. Then she gave a single, small nod. We talked for another hour and a half after that. The tone shifted, as it does when people stop defending positions and start actually talking. Lorraine told a story about Cheryl learning to read that made Cheryl cover her face and laugh. Nathan talked about how Beau had started asking questions about Sandra, about the grandmother he'd only known at the very edge of his memory, and said that Beau had told him he could feel that she must have been kind because of the way I talked about her. I had to look at the window for a moment when Nathan said that. The tea went cold and I put the kettle back on. Lorraine left first. At the back door she paused, and without looking directly at me she said, "You kept your head, Frank. I wouldn't have in your position." Then, she walked out to Cheryl's car. It was the most she was capable of, I think. And it was enough. After Cheryl went to help the kids with their shoes, Nathan stood in my kitchen doorway for a moment without moving. "I keep thinking about what Mum would have done," he said. "She would have sorted all of this out years ago, wouldn't she?" "She would have," I said. "But you sorted it out yourself. That means something more." He hugged me at the door in the way he hadn't since he was a teenager, and I stood on the back step and listened to the car back out of the driveway and disappear down the road. Then I went inside and sat in the kitchen with the quiet, which felt different now. Not empty, just peaceful. Christmas that year was the kind of day Sandra would have loved. Lorraine was careful and attentive in a way that I think cost her something, and I respected that it cost her. She made a point of asking me about the woodworking, about what I was building, about whether I'd been back to see the whale migration down at Point Nepean. She was trying. That was visible, and I chose to meet it generously. Beau gave me a card he'd made himself, a drawing of the 2 of us at my workbench. He'd written inside it, in his careful, deliberate printing, "For Grandpa Frank. You teach me things." I held it together until I got to the car that evening. Chloe had made me a card too, covered in stickers, and a drawing of what I believed was either a dog or a very ambitious horse. And she explained it to me at considerable length and total seriousness, and I gave it the full attention it deserved. Before lunch, Cheryl made a short toast. She thanked everyone for being there. She talked about the year and what it had asked of all of them, and then she looked at me and said clearly, "And we're especially glad you're here at this table, Frank." We want you to know that." Lorraine raised her glass without hesitation. "Here, here. Things are different now. Not perfect. Lorraine is still who she is, and I don't expect her to become someone new. But she no longer moves through this family as though she is its only center of gravity. She seems to have made a quiet accommodation with the fact that there are two grandparents in these children's lives, and that they are better for having both." Nathan and Cheryl took over Beau's therapy billing in April. They've managed it. They cut back on some things, renegotiated their health insurance, made different decisions about where their money went. Nathan told me, with a kind of quiet pride that I recognized because I'd felt it in myself at his age, that it had changed how they thought about things, that knowing they were sustaining it themselves made it feel different. Beau is 7 now. He's been accepted into a supported learning extension program at his school. His therapist says his progress in the past year has been among the most significant she's seen. Last month he told me, with great seriousness, while we were at my workbench working on a birdhouse, that he wanted to be an engineer when he grew up. Because, he said, engineers figure out how to build things that last. I thought about that for a long time afterwards. I thought about Sandra and about the particular kind of love that builds things quietly and doesn't ask for a plaque to be put on them. I thought about all the times I'd let things pass that needed to be said. All the times I'd told myself I was keeping the peace, when really, I was just avoiding the discomfort of honesty. I thought about my father and his patient, unhurried way of knowing exactly what he stood for. The rocking chair I was never building, because in this story it was a hedge I was trimming when things began well. I built one anyway. That autumn, out of spotted gum I'd been holding onto for 2 years. It sits on the back veranda now. Beau likes to sit in it when they visit. He rocks and thinks and asks me things that I'm not always prepared for, about why things fall apart, about how people decide what's fair, about whether things that are broken can be fixed. I don't always have the right answer, but I'm there for the question every time. And I've come to understand, late in life, that reliable presence is the deepest form of love available to us. Not grand gestures, not large checks, just showing up, consistently, with your whole attention, and letting people know by your actions that they can count on you. There's something else I've come to understand, and I want to say it plainly because I think it matters. Generosity that asks for nothing in return is a gift. But generosity that asks for nothing while quietly accepting disrespect is not virtue. It is avoidance dressed up as patience. The people who truly love you do not need you to be endlessly accommodating. They need you to be honest. They need to see that you understand your own value. Because if you've stopped seeing it, there's a very good chance they've stopped seeing it too. If you have been giving and finding yourself moved quietly to the edges, called upon when you're needed and overlooked when you're not, I want you to hear this clearly. Your presence is not worth less than your contribution. You don't have to earn your place in your own family. Speaking up for yourself is not selfishness. It is, in fact, one of the most honest and loving things you can do for everyone in that room, including yourself. Know your worth. Say the quiet thing out loud. Hold your ground without raising your voice. And trust that the people who are genuinely yours will still be there when the conversation is over. Because in my experience, if they love you, they will be.